Rule 1, teams. There shall be 4 players on every team at the start of the game. Each team will designate one player to be the captain, and the captain is the spokesperson for the team only for procedural matters. Procedural matters, timeout, scores wrong, that sort of thing, things that do not involve judgment. Whether a foul was a foul or not, and ball placement, those 2 items are judgment. No one can bring that up to the umpire. No one is supposed to. Everyone does, but no one's supposed to, so that's the rule. And your teams need to fall within the handicap of the tournament. So you add the 4 ratings of the 4 players on the team, and that's the team rating. That team rating needs to fall between the upper and lower limits of the tournament handicap. That's just common sense, but it's part of the rule. If your team's handicap, which is the aggregate handicap of all 4 players in the team, aggregate means you add them all up. If that handicap does not fall within the upper lower limits of the tournament handicap, then you can't play. Okay? The team cannot play or enter that tournament. If you do not have all 4 of your players ready to start the game, say somebody's not there, they're coming from the airport or what have you, you have to make a reasonable effort to find a substitute. It has to be a qualified substitute. Member of the USPA, dues are paid, has a handicap, not playing on any other teams in the tournament, that sort of thing. We'll go over substitutes in another rule. But basically, you have to make a legitimate effort to find a substitute. If you cannot find a substitute, you can go ahead and play up to the first half of the game with less than 4 players. Even though the rule just said you have to have 4 players. You don't. You just have to make an effort to have 4 players. Okay? But the handicap of the players that you have on the field for the first half of the game must fall within the upper and lower limits of the tournament handicap. Make sense? That's the rule. If you entered your team in a USPA tournament or a club tournament using USPA rules, and when you entered the team in, the team fell within the upper and lower limits of the tournament handicap. But during the tournament at some point, which is defined as from the draw to the last game, one of your players was raised by 1 goal or 2 goals. You can continue to play that tournament, but you have to play under your new handicap, which can be as much as 2 goals over the upper limit of the tournament. But you will have to give the full handicap to the other teams. So for example, if you're entered a 12-goal tournament and you had a 12-goal team and your 16-year-old player was raised from 0 to 2 during the tournament, you're now a 14-goal team. You can continue to play, but you have to give the additional handicap to the other teams if the tournament is handicapped. If the tournament is an open, which means that no teams give each other handicaps, you will still have to give the additional handicap, which would be either 1 or 2 goals. You will still have to give the additional handicap that you're over the upper tournament limit. You'll still have to give that in handicap to their teams. Not the full handicap, just the amount over the upper limit of the tournament. Okay? So if you're playing the US Open, it's 22 goals, and you enter a team that's 22 goals, and let's say I don't know what the US Open is, 18 to 22? Okay, say it's 18 to 22. And you're playing a 20-goal team, and you have a 22-goal team, you won't give them any handicap. But let's say your 16-year-old player was raised from 0 to 2. Now you're a 24-goal team, and you're playing a 20-goal team. Okay, you would think you would give them 4, but no, you give them 2 because it's 2 goals above the 22-goal upper limit of the Open. Make sense? If it doesn't, just rewind it and play it again because I'm not sure it makes sense to me, but that's the rule. If your team is raised more than 2 goals during a tournament, then you can't continue to play. You have to find a substitute for one of your players or more of your players to bring your team within the upper limit of the tournament handicap. So 2 goals is your outside grace area, if you will. If you have a team that had a player raised as much as 2 goals during the tournament, and you're going to make a substitution on that team of any of the players, if you make a substitution, you have to bring the team back down within the tournament handicap limits. So it's only if you keep the original team together that you can continue to play with the 2 goals over the upper limit. If you substitute, the new aggregate handicap, the team has to come within the tournament limits. Your aggregate team handicap on the field for that game, whatever game we're talking about, is the highest handicap that you had on the field at any one moment during the game. So if you're playing, say, an 8 to 10 goal tournament and you have a 10 goal team and you had to get a substitute because somebody was late or what have you, and you played with a 9-goal team for 5 chukkers, and then your guy showed up or your gal showed up, and now you're a 10-goal team for the last chukker. You're a 10-goal team for the whole game, and that change is made when the substitution is made. And if it's opposite and your team actually drops in rating, you keep the highest rating. So it's the highest rating that your team had available at any one moment, 1 second on the field. It's that for the whole game. Let's talk about being late for the game, which happens from time to time, or in some clubs, every time. If you have a 1 o'clock game, the game starts at 1 o'clock. At 1:15, if the team is not ready on the field, they're supposed to forfeit, or you can call a forfeit. That's not very often done. If you're in a super uptight club and everybody hates each other, then that may be the case. So just know it's in the rules that can happen. But between 1 o'clock and 1:15, if any one player is late, that player is subject to a yellow card. So we could technically start the game with a penalty 5 from the center. So get your slow pokes going. If the game's at 1, be on the field ready to go at 12:59 or 1. We umpires are on the field usually 5 minutes beforehand, blowing the whistle and getting ready. Oftentimes I'll go out about 10 minutes beforehand to collect some balls and make sure my horse can jump the boards and isn't scared of everything. And at 5 till I blow the whistle. And when it's time to start, I'm ready to start. Now, if it's a relaxed club and the host tournament committee is okay with it and it's how they do things, there's some flexibility there. But just know that it's in the rule that after 15 minutes, it can be a forfeit. You know, the host tournament committee is really responsible for imposing sanctions for lateness and game forfeits and that sort of thing. So the umpire is going to work closely with the host tournament committee and impose, sort of what they want. We have been in some situations before where players were coming from the airport and they called in and the opposing team was fine with waiting for them because they wanted to have a good game. Everybody wants to play. That's the point. Very few clubs want to win by default. They exist, but very few, and nobody really wants to play there. But anyway, a long story short, the management wanted to get the game going, but the teams wanted to wait. Both teams actually wanted to wait for the players on one of the teams, and the management was blowing the horn and complaining to us and wanted to get going. But the management was not part of the host tournament committee. They were just hired hands. So we were in a horrible position. What do we do? Because we're on a schedule as well. Oftentimes we go from game to game. So it was a very uncomfortable and awkward position. So if you are a manager of a club reading this or part of a club's infrastructure as far as committees and ownership and things like that, make these policies clear to your management and clear to your umpires and clear to your players. If you have an emergency and you're coming from the airport, we will give you X amount of time. And then that's it. You have to find a substitute or play anyway. Don't let the managers and the umpires have to be in the awkward and uncomfortable position of trying to manage patrons and professional players to that degree. We do enough of it on the field. They're difficult enough to handle. We don't need to handle them off the field. So do that. The American rule. In all USPA events of any handicap level, you must have one, what they call registered player member on the team that does not include the sponsor of the team. A registered player member is an American or a Canadian with an USPA handicap. Well, you have to have USPA handicap anyway to play in a USPA event. So here's the deal. With the exception of the sponsor of the team, you need an American or a Canadian on your team. Sorry, Canadians, but in this rule you're considered American, so join the club. An American is defined as someone with a passport issued by the government of the United States of America, in case you were wondering. And a Canadian is the same thing, but they have a Canadian passport. So that's pretty much the gist of Rule 1 teams. A lot of that's obvious, some of it's a little technical. I'm sure you've heard rumors of the American rule or the handicap rule and this and that, and never bothered to go read it. So read it. And if you have a situation that's even close to being marginal or questionable, read the rule. You can come to this video and listen, but I want to encourage you to also read the rule. It reads slow and technical, but that's okay. You go through one sentence at a time. But that's basically Rule 1, teams.